Welcome to the HIRA for Plumbers program. This is part of the three-course module of hazard identification and risk assessment, which forms part of the total PRIME program. Please ensure that you have already taken part in the introduction to HIRA before continuing with this module. Throughout this course, we are going to be discussing risks and hazards that pose a threat to you out in the industry. When we look at the specific risks that could affect yourself, others, as well as the environment, we'll be taking a look at certain scenarios, mitigation strategies, as well as the monitoring and review process that we should go through. But we start off with a seemingly insignificant task, something that is often overlooked in the industry: housekeeping. Now, why is that? Well, you see, housekeeping is actually a very powerful thing to do in order to mitigate real risk. Why is that? Well, let's look at the definition of housekeeping: a place for everything and everything in its place. This means it goes deeper than just sweeping, dusting, or cleaning off the equipment that we're using. Housekeeping plays an active role in risk mitigation by ensuring things like good lighting. You see, it extends further than just the daily washing up or making sure the area is neat. Good lighting means that we can see danger. If you cannot see it, you cannot protect yourself from it. Having good ventilation, having the hygiene facilities, the things that keep us clean, also clean. The aisles and storage areas clearly marked so that it prevents bumping, slipping, or tripping. Good stacking and storage practices, making sure that all our yards are tidy and refuse is always kept in place. Now, on the flip side, there is also the potential to have poor housekeeping, and this could lead to incidents and accidents on our site. Poor housekeeping will lead to risks: unnecessary rubbish, waste, and vegetation lying around, poor stacking and storing practices, the unsafe handling of flammable liquids, or even compartments not kept in good condition can all lead to potential sources of danger which will cause risks to those around us as well as ourselves. Here are a few practical suggestions for you to use in your organization to maintain good and proper housekeeping. Now, this list is not exhaustive. In fact, these are just a few suggestions for you to be able to implement and then start a good pattern or behavior of housekeeping activities. The first thing we want to focus on is passages, aisles, and walkways, ensuring that they are not just clearly marked, but are kept clear of obstacles. This will prevent injuries to those working in that environment, and it will also ensure a safe egress point without obstacles to any emergency exit. Please ensure that you have adequate waste bins provided. Now remember, if there are no waste bins, workers and others tend to throw waste materials or paper on the floor, and this could create hazards such as fire risks as well. Any spillage should be cleared and cleaned immediately. This is to prevent workers from slipping on any spilled chemicals, and if there is chemicals involved, this would also prevent any contamination to the ground. Place everything in the correct place. Remember the definition of housekeeping: everything has a place, and so everything should be in its place. Make sure you clean your workplace at the end of every shift. Don't leave it for the next shift to do. And then for emergency management, you should also report any unusual parcels or packages to your security or occupational health and safety department. No matter what business you're in, good housekeeping is an essential part of every job. Working areas, aisles, walkways, and equipment must be kept clear of loose materials, tools, and scraps. Materials such as wood or pipe fittings should be stored in an orderly and secured manner. Spills of grease, water, or oil must be cleaned up as soon as possible. A delay could result in an accident to you or someone else. A safe access shall be maintained in all work areas. This is according to law. Shortcuts should be avoided. Never block any aisles, traffic lanes, or fire exits with any equipment or material. Making sure that you and others can get into a workplace safely and out safely in an emergency is an important part of housekeeping. Not only that, it ensures safe access. So get to know your workplace in particular. This may mean that for a new site, you need to do a site walk or an inspection of the area to ensure that it is safe for you and others to work on. Take notice of any warning or prohibition signs, the location of firefighting appliances, your safety representative and first aider on the site, as well as all the emergency exits. And then be aware of other work near you, especially if it is the client themselves performing work, or perhaps other contractors. Remember, you should never walk under suspended loads, and be aware of persons working above you. Watch out for vehicles, as well as any mobile equipment moving to and from the environment that you are in. Are any of us satisfied with just the minimum? Well, it has come to that part of these courses where we need to read the legislation. In this case, we want to look at General Safety Regulation 8, and that is in terms of stacking and storing. Now remember, as we go through all these specific legislation items, the different regulations or the OHSS Act in particular, we are going to have to read what the law says. Now I know it can be a little bit boring, so bear with me as we go through this, because I'm sure you know me by now, after all the courses that you've already been through, that the legislation is only the minimum. And I'll say it again, we are not happy with minimum. In fact, we are concerned with doing best practice, making sure that we are diligent in terms of occupational health and safety, because none of us want to have the bare minimum. In fact, if we were happy with minimum, then we would basically say that those who use us as service providers should be happy with the minimum we provide. But what sets us apart in our industry? What makes us different to every other service provider out there? It's that we do not provide the bare minimum. We go over and above, giving quality service, making sure that we are unique in what we do. We need to have the same attitude toward health and safety, because that is part and parcel of everything that we perform for our clients. So let's get into the boring part of some of these courses. But remember, it is a very vital part to continue to remember. Now we start off with General Safety Regulation 8 in this course, and that is the regulation on stacking and storing. No employer shall require or permit the building of stacks which consists of consecutive tiers on top of one another unless the stacking operation is executed by or under the personal supervision of a person with specific knowledge and experience of this type of work, the base is level and capable of sustaining the weight exerted on it by the stacks. All the articles which make up any single tier are consistently of the same size, shape, and mass. Pallets and containers are in good condition, and any support structure used for the stacking of articles is structurally sound and can support the articles to be stacked on it. An employer shall not permit articles to be removed from a stack except from the topmost tier or part of that tier, and anybody to climb onto or from a stack except if the stack is stable and the climbing is done with the aid of a ladder or other safety facility or means. An employer shall take steps to ensure that persons engaged in stacking operations do not come within reach of machinery which may endanger their safety. Stacks that are in danger of collapsing are dismantled immediately in a safe manner, and the stability of stacks is not endangered by vehicles or other machinery or persons moving past them. Unless a stack is otherwise supported, an employer shall take steps to ensure that tiers of stacked material consisting of sacks, cases, cartons, tins, or similar containers are secured by laying up articles in a header and stretcher fashion, and that corners are securely bonded, and are stepped back half the depth of a single container at least every fifth tier, or that, alternatively, successive tiers are stepped back by a lesser amount, provided that at least the same average angle of inclination to the vertical is achieved, provided further that where the containers are of a regular shape and their nature and size are such that the stack will be stable, they may be stacked with the sides of the stack vertical if the total height of the stack does not exceed 3 times the smaller dimension of the underlying base of the stack. And finally, notwithstanding the provisions of Subregulation 4, freestanding stacks that are built with the aid of machinery may, with the approval of an inspector, be built to a height and in a manner permitted by the nature of the containers being stacked, provided that the stacks are stable and do not overhang, and the operator of the stacking machinery is rendered safe as regards falling articles. Well done. You got through the Occupational Health and Safety Act regulation unscathed, but there are more to come. So take note of the legislation in this course. Remember what we are trying to achieve. We are looking at specific risks and hazards that will affect you in the industry. At the same time, we need to discuss the legislation that backs up the minimum compliance. And then we take a look at what we can do in the industry to make it even better. So now that we've discussed the stacking and storing regulation, let us look at the packing of stock within our organizations. Remember that stored material must not create a hazard for employees. So employers, you should make workers aware of such factors as the material's height and weight, how accessible the stored materials are to the user, and the condition of the containers where the materials are being stored when stacking and piling materials. To prevent creating hazards when storing materials, employers and employees must do the following. Keep storage areas free from accumulated materials that cause tripping, fire or explosions, or that may contribute to the harboring of rats and other pests. Can you see how housekeeping is coming into the provision of packing and stacking? Well, we should also place stored materials inside buildings that are under construction at least 6 meters from hoistways or inside floor openings and at least 10 meters away from exterior walls. We always want to separate non-compatible materials and equip employees who work on stored grain in silos, hoppers, or tanks with lifelines and safety belts. Now remember, when stacking material, it can be dangerous if workers do not follow the safety guidelines. Falling materials and collapsing loads can crush or pin workers, causing injuries and even death. To help prevent injuries when stacking materials, workers must do the following. First of all, remove nails from any timber before stacking. Stack and level timber on solidly supported bracing. Ensure that stacks are stable and self-supporting. Do not store pipes and bars in racks that face main aisles. This is to avoid creating a hazard to passers-by when removing supplies. Stack bags and bundles in interlocking rows to keep them secure. Stack bag material by stepping back the layers and cross-keying bags at least every 10 layers. And if you want to remove bags from the stack, start from the top row first. Most businesses use shelves to store goods and materials, and racking units are often used for storage in warehouses and factories, typically in conjunction with a pallet. Now, shelving and racking must be suitable for its purpose, as well as be installed and maintained properly. So if we are using shelving and racking, please ensure that floors are sound and level, that you follow the manufacturer's installation instructions, and where shelving or racking needs to be fixed to a wall, the wall must be able to support the load. Where appropriate, special safety ladders are provided to people climbing on shelving. Units are spaced correctly to allow easy access for staff, and if necessary, even mechanical handling equipment such as a forklift truck. Shelves and racks should be properly aligned, and goods must never overhang the shelves. Always make sure that the correct maximum load for racking is displayed, as well as personal protective equipment must be used where necessary. Items should always be stacked correctly. This means that the heaviest must go at the bottom where possible. Materials that employees frequently need should be readily accessible, so this should never be above head height. Check shelving and racking units regularly for any obvious signs of physical or chemical damage. If you do need to use pallets in racking and stacking, please ensure that you avoid using a pallet which cannot cope with its load. Avoid poorly designed or constructed pallets, damaged pallets, or even using the wrong type of pallet for the racking system used or the material substance stored. Avoid poorly handling pallets. You must use any mechanical handling equipment such as forklift trucks safely. Anyone operating a forklift needs to be fully trained, and people in areas where forklifts operate must be aware of the warning alarms, signs, and notices and what they mean. In order to protect the environment around us, as well as ourselves and employees from danger, businesses have the duty of care to store and correctly manage waste that we create. We must store waste in suitable containers, making sure it doesn't harm the environment or other humans' health. When you dispose of your waste or send it to be recovered, you must ensure that it is handled by an authorized organization. Some waste is classified as hazardous because of its dangerous or toxic nature and is subject to additional regulations. If you're needing to store any type of timber, make sure that timber and board material is stacked and stored safely. This includes the stacks of timber, making sure that they're on firm level ground, not exceeding any height ratios, are always inspected, and have no loose materials laying on top of them. If you need to store and stack any glass panes, you should ensure that you stack the glass at the correct angle. Also, you must provide the correct and appropriate personal protective equipment. Make sure that you secure the storage racks, ensuring that these are not overloaded. When it comes to the storage of dangerous or hazardous materials, you must ensure that chemicals and dangerous substances are stored and handled in a way that minimizes the risk posed by those substances and which limits people's exposure to them. You should also assess the risk of storing and handling substances hazardous to the environment as well as human health. For instance, consider the effects of a leak to the air, water, and surrounding land. This can help you to avoid being prosecuted for causing pollution. You also need to assess the risk of storing and handling dangerous substances, including the possibility of environmental damage caused by leaks and spills. Now that you have identified the dangers of stored dangerous or hazardous materials, you now need to implement any precautionary measures needed to control the risk. We start off by storing chemicals according to the manufacturer's instructions, and we do this by finding the information on the safety data sheets. Remember, you should try keeping the minimum quantity of hazardous substances that are necessary for your tasks. Store incompatible substances separately, and then Take steps to prevent the release or leakage of dangerous substances. Now, if there is the potential for leaking or even the accidental release of these dangerous substances, you must keep a spill kit near to that storage area and ensure that all staff are trained in what to do in the event of that spill. If there are any spills or leaks, make sure you clean it up immediately. Use appropriate precautions when handling these substances. For example, you must wear the correct PPE as well as have adequate ventilation. All employees who store and handle dangerous substances must be properly trained and ensure that all containers are properly labeled with the correct information for that specific material. Ensure that all flammable substances are correctly stored in suitable containers and are not stored near a source of ignition. Here are a few simple steps to control the risk of hazardous substances. Keep only the minimum quantity of hazardous substances that is necessary. Store any incompatible substances separately. Always prevent the release or leaks. Train employees to store and handle hazardous substances properly. Label them correctly. Store flammable substances in suitable containers away from any sources of ignition. Place stores of liquid above ground where they are unlikely to be damaged. Maintain any gauge, valve, and pipework. Have procedures for dealing with emergency leaks or spillage. Use a secondary containment system, such as a drip tray or a bund, and always monitor oil use. Unexpectedly high use may indicate a leak. We should also avoid the common practice of alphabetical storage of chemicals. These reactions can be a disaster for your storeroom. For example, aluminum foil and bromine react at room temperature, producing enough energy to become incandescent. In addition, many incompatible concentrated acids, such as acetic acid and nitric acid, are often stored together. All chemicals in stockrooms should be stored so as to avoid incompatibilities. In your manual, you will have some of the below examples of how you can correctly store and separate all chemicals within your storage. You will need to take a look at the SDS or safety data sheet for the correct labeling of all chemicals and try to identify which category you can place them into. Are they flammable or combustible and not highly toxic, as well as compatible with water? Are they flammable or combustible and not highly toxic and incompatible with water? Are they oxidizers and non-flammable, compatible with water? Or oxidizers and non-flammable, incompatible with water? Are they air sensitive? Is chemical requiring refrigeration? Compressed gas cylinders separated as to oxidizers, reducers, corrosives, and toxics, as well as unstable chemicals such as explosives. When it comes to dealing with any chemical substances, we must ensure the correct procedures are always followed, and we want to avoid and deal with any chemical spills. So you should manage your site carefully to reduce the risk of chemical spills. If you have a chemical spill on your site, it is important that your staff know how to deal with it. If you do cause pollution, you could be prosecuted and fined. You should report pollution incidents as soon as they happen. But you should also plan for pollution incidents. You should have a pollution incident response procedure in place for dealing with any spills. Make sure that your staff are familiar with the procedure and know how to implement it. If you store lots of chemicals or have a chemical warehouse, you may need to install a spill alarm so that you can evacuate the building when there is a spill. Our risk assessment has identified that there is a potential for a spill. Part and parcel of our mitigating factors will be a reactive approach to the prevention of pollution from the actual spill. And we can do this by ensuring that we have absorbent materials such as sand and other contaminant equipment suitable for the type and quantity of chemical we store and use on site. But we must keep them close to where we might need them, in particular the delivery areas. We must also make sure that all staff know where they are and how to use them. Now you can buy spill kits containing all the appropriate equipment for the chemicals you store. But try to prevent liquid spills from entering drains, surface waters, or groundwater. For example, use earth to block the flow of large spills, or use sand or a commercial spill kit to soak them up. You should never hose down a spill, as you could cause a much worse pollution incident. If you do store chemicals in a vehicle, you should also carry a spill kit suitable for the quantity and type of chemicals you have in that vehicle. Safety signage, as well as coloring, are standardized in all organizations, and this helps to protect the health and safety of employees and visitors in the workplace. Safety signs are used to draw attention to health and safety hazards. They point out hazards that may not be immediately obvious. They provide general information and directions. They remind employees where personal protective equipment must be worn. They also indicate where emergency equipment is located, and they warn where certain actions are prohibited. Color attracts attention and can be used extensively for safety purposes. For example, color can be used as an additional safety measure to indicate the contents of pipes and the nature of its hazards. The choices of color also draws attention to the severity of the hazard. For example, a dangerous hazard is communicated by the color red. When employees are aware of the hazards around them and take the necessary precautions, the possibility of an accident or injury is minimized. However, while safety signs and colors are valuable in warning employees of hazards, they are not substitutes for eliminating or reducing these hazards. So let us have a look at some safety sign categories. Now there are three basic sign categories, namely regulatory, information, and warning signs. Each category is distinguished by its shape. These categories are divided into subcategories that can be recognized by their color. Regulatory signs is a circle that indicates an order is in force. Permission signs allows a specific action. A prohibition sign prohibits an action. Mandatory signage requires an action. There are two types of information signs. Information 1 is a square that provides information. Information signage 2 provides general information or directions. Fire signage provides information on fire equipment. First aid and safety equipment signage provides information on first aid and safety equipment. Warning signs are triangles indicating caution or danger. Caution signage indicates potential risk. Danger signs warns against definite danger that can cause irreversible and serious injury or death. Radiation signage indicates the risk of radiation. Here are some examples of regulatory symbols, such as the signs to ensure the wearing of head protection or air supply hoods, or the prohibition of smoking or entry. Here are examples of information symbols. the location of fire safety equipment, like a fire hose reel, as well as the location of a first aid box, or the location and direction of emergency exits. Here are some examples of warning symbols. The general warning sign of danger, the warning of corrosive materials, the warning of a fire hazard, as well as the warning of dangerous gas. In addition to signage, color can be used to indicate hazards or point out safety equipment. For example, color can be applied on indicator lights and buttons, pipes, separate work areas, machinery, vehicles, as well as walkways, floors, and stairs. With the extensive use of color in our daily lives, we have learned to associate certain colors with specific meanings. For example, red on a traffic light means stop. Now, many organizations take advantage of these associations to help employees easily recognize the message associated with colors and then respond quickly, as in the case of the indicator lights and control buttons. For instance, if the color is red on an indicator light, this would indicate danger or alarm. If this color was on a button or control, it would indicate a stop or off switch. If the color was yellow on an indicator light, this could indicate caution. If it was placed onto a button or control, this could also indicate caution or intervention needed. If the color is green on an indicator light, this could indicate the safe condition. If it was used on a button or control, this could indicate the start or on switch. In our industry, we deal with a lot of piping systems. Now, there are many ways the contents of pipes are identified for safety purposes. A way of ensuring that employees have a definite knowledge of what a pipe contains is by labeling the pipe with a tag that clearly identifies the material inside, or attaching the appropriate symbol to the pipe which describes the material in the pipe, as well as painting the pipe with a safety color. Arrows on the pipe are often used to show the direction of flow of the contents as further safety precautions. Safety colors commonly used for pipes in the workplace are as follows. If a pipe or any other piece of equipment is painted with the color red, this would classify a fire quenching material, such as hose reels or sprinkler systems, which contain water. There are other examples of fire equipment that are colored red, such as foam or carbon dioxide fire extinguishers. Items that are colored green could be liquids that are non-hazardous by nature, such as drinkable water. The color blue are gases that are not hazardous by nature, such as compressed air. And if the color is yellow, these could be materials that are hazardous by nature, whether flammable, explosive, radioactive, or materials with extreme temperatures or pressures. Safety colors are used in a variety of areas. Yellow has a meaning of caution, and this can be used on steps, guardrails, low beam storage cabinets for flammable materials, containers for corrosives or unstable materials. The color orange is defined as a warning meaning. This could be used in two areas: hazardous parts of machines which may cut, crush, or injure a worker inside movable guards or inside transmission guards for gears, pulleys, or chains. They can also be used for exposed parts such as edges of pulleys, gears, rollers, cutting devices, or power saws. Red indicates danger or stop, as well as fire protection equipment. When it comes to danger or stop, it could be containers of flammable liquids, emergency stop bars, or stop buttons. For fire protection equipment, it could be alarm boxes, fire extinguishers, or even exit signs. Green is associated with safety, and this indicates the location of first aid services, first aid kits, stretchers, emergency exit routes, safety equipment such as emergency safety showers. Blue is the information for safety. These are signs requiring the use for PPE. They could be general information signs or even directional signs. Black is markings for traffic routes and housekeeping. Traffic routes, passageways, and floor markings.